Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the May 21st, 2025 meeting of the Livable Roadways Committee. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. If we can go ahead and do roll call.
Absolutely. Councilmember Lynn Hertel.
Here.
Tanika Mills.
Here.
Caroline Second.
Here.
David Hay.
Here.
Emily Hinsdale.
Here.
Danielle Riffenberg. Anna Grunman. Karen Kress.
Here.
Rebecca Hessinger.
Here.
Omar Pirzada. Here. Jason Jackman.
Here virtually.
Nicole Dufa.
Here.
Lori Mark Rolangia.
Here.
Sarah Phillips.
Here.
Una Johnson.
Here.
Catherine Foyle.
Here.
Arizona Jenkins. Gus Ignis. Ashley Anderson. Debbie Roney. And we do have.
Great. Is there any public comment today? I think all the faces look familiar, but not online that I see either. Okay, so we have quite a few minutes to approve. We have the February 9th, March 26th, and April 6th, 2025 minutes. Does anybody have any comments on that? No one does, if someone can make a motion. To approve.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Catherine, second from David. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, I'm sorry, Rebecca.
No.
did you have-
I was just playing with my.
Okay. No, that's fine, that's fine. Okay, we're gonna dive right into the tip.
Good morning, Elizabeth Watkins, TPO staff. Happy tip season. For those of you who have been on LRC for a while, I just want to call to your attention one thing we're doing a little bit differently this year, where we're breaking out the Transportation Improvement Program from the priority list. So there's two presentations, they're two distinct documents, and they feed the project delivery process in very different ways. That's part of the reason why we made that choice. So what exactly is the TIP? The TIP is a list of federally funded and regionally significant projects that are programmed to advance over the next 5 years. So anytime between October 1, 2025, all the way through September 30th, 2029, these projects will advance in some shape or form. Why do we do this? Well, we're required not only by federal regulations, but also by state statute. And really the primary purpose of having a transportation improvement program is to bring visibility to those projects that have federal funds to them. You may recall some of your MPO history that MPOs were created in the 60s to give locals more of a voice in the federal transportation decision-making process. So the TIP is one area to bring transparency to those projects that have those funds. I've noticed sometimes that there's confusion between the FDOT work program and the DPO's transportation improvement program. And I wanted to call to your attention that they're two separate things, but they're very much related. So the DOT work program is everything District 7 is going to deliver over the next 5 years. And that includes state funded projects as well as federally funded projects. The TIP is really a subset of that. It's all those federally funded projects that are put into a format the TPO does a lot of public engagement on and coordination. And that's really the core of what the TIP is, those federally funded projects that are in DOT's work program. That doesn't mean just DOT is delivering those. PART has many projects. The City of Tampa, Hillsborough County also deliver, federally funded projects, but they're sourced from the DOT work program. So a variety of things are required for adoption. I mentioned public engagement earlier. That's something we take very seriously here at the TPO. So we put out road signs, we send flyers, we do committee meetings, we go to HOAs. We require with all of our partners, but particularly DOT and HART, given that they are really the conduit for most of the federal funds in Hillsborough County. The TIP must be consistent with our long-range transportation plan, and it's very much not a wish list. The projects that are in the TIP have funds that are programmed so they can advance. And the costs cannot exceed the revenues. So again, it's not a wish list. This is really just a culmination of all those projects that we expect to advance soon. You'll see this diagram again in the next presentation, but the TIP is really the end process of about 18 months worth of work. Last winter of 2023, the TPO worked with local partners to do a call for projects. Then the priority list you saw last year, that was adopted in last June, given to DOT for incorporation in their tentative work program that was issued in December, and now it comes to you in the form of a transportation improvement program that the TPO board will consider this June. So how do projects get in the TIP? Some of the projects come from the TPO's priorities. We'll discuss that priority list in the next presentation. But the vast majority of projects come from DOT's priority projects and programs, whether that's their strategic intermodal system or any projects on the highway, on their highway facilities. It's also local projects that are federalized HARTS projects because they receive a lot of funding from FDOT, from the Federal Transit Administration, as well as its multimodal. The airport receives funds, seaport, through the port, so on and so forth. And a good chunk of the TIP is also dedicated to operations and maintenance to ensuring that we maintain a state of good repair. So let's get into it. The TIP is over 180 projects. We're totaling over $2.5 billion over that 5-year period. And that breaks out to a little over half going to a highway program. And when we say highway, we're thinking anything that's considered sort of transportation. So roads, sidewalks, trails, that's all kind of grouped under highway, just given the categorization of federal funds, which I won't get into. A little over 400 million are transit funds that are mostly to HART, but also support some transportation disadvantage service. 187 million goes to the port for various projects. A little over 100 million goes to the airport, and there's $34 million program specifically for freight projects. So taking a look at the projects as a whole, this graphic shows you by individual projects, how many projects align with the TPO's LRTP categories. And as a reminder, our categories are smart cities. So anything signalization, technology, really using software and hardware to advance a seamless transportation system. Good repair and resilience, resurfacing, bridge repair, fleet maintenance, Vision Zero, anything that has a primary safety component or traffic calming. Our real choices is local transit service and trails. And then major projects are those big dollar projects, meaning widenings, interchanges, as well as fixed skyway transit. These are high dollar, high impact projects. So when you look at all 187 projects, the vast majority are those state of good repair projects. You're resurfacing, your bridge repairs, and then the rest are less. Actually wanted to start with this slide. But when you look at all $2.5 billion, you see that the majority of the funding, a little less than half, goes to the major projects. And we're not surprised by that because, again, those are high dollar value projects. West Shore Interchange is estimated, around $400 million. So they're big projects, big impact. They would take up most of the budget, even though overall there are more projects that go towards maintaining our system. So I went back and looked at some of the previous Livable Roadway Committee meetings and notes. And I know one of the prevailing messages that you all have shared is you want to see that pie change. and we hear you. So one thing I wanted to bring to your attention is some federal funds are directly influenced by the TPO. And this is what this pie chart shows. Those federal funds that the TPO has discretion over largely go to safety good repair projects. It's a smaller bucket. It's only like $93 million, but where we can immediately make the biggest difference, we are hearing you, we are hearing the community, and that's where we're putting our smaller pots towards. So I'm not going to just spit up 200 projects at you. So there is a QR code that will be on your screen, hopefully in a few seconds, where you could use your phone to scan it. And if you want to see a list of those projects in a map form, think about the places that are important to you, where you live, where you work. I thought this might be a more digestible way to get through this presentation, because I've only called out a few projects across the categories.
Will this presentation be available? Can you email it out to us after?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Getting more films, so I'm just going to go through a couple highlights, but we'll look forward to your questions. So looking at a few limited access capacity projects, there are a few on I-275 that we're expecting to bid advance. The first of which is Section 5 of TD Next, going from the West Shore Interchange to downtown. Right-of-way is programmed for $30 million, but however, construction is not yet programmed and is currently estimated at $275 million. So there's a little bit of money in there, I think maybe $300,000 to start to do whatever right-of-way acquisition DOT needs, but it is not programmed for construction. The West Shore Interchange is moving along very nicely. DOT expects to start later this year on working through some of the punch through streets, and then later in 2026, continue some of that work. But that will go through, I think, at least fiscal year 30. And just as a reminder, what that project will include will have added capacity to reconstruct general use lanes and 2 new express lanes in each direction. It'll also include a widening of State Route 60, punch throughs to the local streets, and some trails along within the project area. Now going eastbound to I-4, there are 2 auxiliary lane projects. And when we say auxiliary lane, we're thinking about lanes that really just help move traffic between exits. So it's not a full general lane, it's just to help keep traffic moving on the interstate for those exiting and entering I-4. So those 2 projects, there's one in unincorporated county from the way station to west of McIntosh Road, and then in Plant City from west of Bethlehem Road to Branch Road. And you've heard the presentation from Turnpike, but they are currently exploring widening the Suncoast Parkway from Van Dyke to Lutz Lake Fern. I believe it's 4 lanes, and they're expecting to widen that to 8 lanes. Looking at some other capacity projects throughout the county. Most of these are in East County or in the Palm River area, with MLK being widened from 2 to 4 lanes from Kingsway to McIntosh. State Route 60 from Valrico to Dover. This is in the Palm River area. This is a really important freight area. And that dovetails with the next project from US 41 from Dover to Austin. DOT is investing a lot of money there to do some grading separation. I think there's also going to be some sidewalks and trails for more individuals who work in that area to have access to a car. So lots of action in the Palm River area to alleviate freight congestion. And then Hillsborough County is advancing their bookend projects from US 41 to Covington Garden Drive. Now taking a look at some of the bike walk projects in the Transportation Improvement Program, there is an overpass for the South Coast Greenway to get over Big Bend Road, pretty close to where East Bay High School is, if you're familiar with that area. That is intended to move to construction in fiscal year 29. The city of Tampa received Sun Trail money to advance the South Tampa Greenway in fiscal year 30. The Tampa Bypass Canal from Morrisburg to Bisbee Downs, that will has funding for preliminary engineering. And then along Fowler near near Temple Terrace, there will be a side path between 56 and I-75. And DOT is also making investments around some middle schools in Plant City, Tomlin and Marshall, as well as along State Route 39 and US 301. There are some important safety projects that have been doing. Bush Boulevard is one that's been a longstanding priority for the TPO between Dale Mabry and Nebraska, where that project will include adding medians, sidewalks, also upgrading the signals, narrowing the lanes and reducing the speeds. So that project is moving along nicely. One slight change to the scope is I think some of the sidewalk gaps were not able to be included because of just the tremendous right-of-way costs, I think double what was originally anticipated. So there will be sidewalks filled in, but not the complete network like we originally had thought, just based on cost escalations and how those, what those right-of-way estimates came back as. That scope had to change a bit. Additionally, along Fowler, there will be a variety of safety improvements on the other side. So from Fowler Avenue up to 56, where we're going to see wider sidewalks, intersection improvements, mid-block crossings, signalized mid-block crossings for pedestrians across Fowler, which I think is a much needed improvement. And then the city of Temple Terrace will intends to install a pedestrian signal at 56 and Sawaha Road.
Before you go on, I think a lot of us had a questionable face at the Bush. So what does that mean? Does that mean the sidewalk will simply stop and people will have to walk on the roadway?
No, there's still, I'll have to get a diagram from DOT on that. I don't know all the details. So there were some businesses, and there was a vet, a doctor's office, where the cost to purchase the property and relocate the business, I think doubled or tripled. So there were some areas in the sidewalk that couldn't be filled because I think it was an additional $5 or $10 million to add to the project.
I still don't understand how you have to take away an office to put in a sidewalk. Like I'm having a hard time visualizing that. Maybe that's
Yeah.
I will have to get.
Unless the building is right up on,
Yeah.
maybe a previous widening or something.
is there a sidewalk there already and you just can't, so basically you're telling people they're gonna have to walk in the street for that portion.
Yeah, so there will be sidewalks on at least one side in those areas where there isn't current sidewalks. There, I believe there are sections where both sides of the roads don't have it. And I think it was the eastbound side didn't have it, but I prefer to give you facts. And if I could go back to DOT, maybe get some drawings of where the sidewalks will be included, while there will not be, and circulate back to the committee.
That would be great.
Also, in that whole kind of thought process of when they're deciding, oh, we can't buy this to put the sidewalk in, is there any discussion of, can the lanes be narrowed? Is there a median in the road that we could reduce the median and then get more on the sidewalk side? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah.
I'm not visualizing someone, I'm visualizing someone walking down the street and then realizing it ends.
That would
Like,
cost more than $5 million. They'd have to reduce stormwater and move the curb line and everything, because it's all. I'm just saying, it'd be more than $5 million.
I just don't understand how that's ADA compliant.
Does it just stop? I mean,
I think truthfully, I would love to go back and get all of those details, but I've kind of just heard them secondhand. So instead of just speculating, can I go back to DOT, really understand where they will be, where they will not? So what was told to me is the original plan was to have sidewalks on both sides, but there were some significant challenges to finishing one section. And I know that part of the scope is narrowing in some areas and adding medians. So my hope is, and FDOT knows what important priorities to spend for the TPO, that they've exhausted all options and just get pushed it over. But I'll go back and get all the details on those linkages and ask your questions.
And maybe also a follow-up, the right-of-way preservation map for the county, like, right, they've got orders that they preserved right-of-way, so then if a site comes in and redevelops, we're sure, like, we'll say the vet business leaves, right? And someone else buys it, is it on the border preservation map that when they have to redevelop, they would dedicate the land to solve this problem. That's also what.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head if that is a forward that's, and I mean, you're the expert on that.
I don't,
Um,
I'm in trouble.
because my understanding of corridor preservation plan is that would require developers to make it easy to move, so they could put a building within, like we need a right of way, but they would still have to.
Right, if there's right of way reserved, like it would, some corridor, this is my understanding, and this was years since I've worked in the county, but they've got these maps where they say, okay, if this site comes in, we need 6 feet. I just want to ensure that if we can't solve it now, we set it up to solve it when it comes and redevelops in 10 years or something, or 5 or whatever.
I knew it would be great if we could get that email because we are not going to meet again before the tip approval.
Absolutely, yeah, I'll prioritize that today, get that information to Connor and the district.
Thanks. Anybody else before we move on? Okay.
So moving on to the transit investments in the transportation improvement program, the Tico streetcar extension remains in the tip. That discretionary award from FTA, as well as the small starts commitment from DOT to help get that local match is still in there. DOT also gives state funds to HART to operate service on Route 34, which is Hillsborough, and the 400, which is Nebraska Metro Rapid. Heavy maintenance facility and longstanding priority that continues to be funded with a discretionary grant, as well as other sources that HART has compiled. And the TPO has a long history of using those sub-allocated funds that I showed you the graph of earlier to partner with HART to help them replace their buses, to keep their fleet in a state of good repair, as well as some funding to replace and rehabilitate existing bus loops. There are a variety of signal upgrades happening throughout the county. Again, near Adamo and Maydell Drive, and then in the Lutz area along US 41, a variety of signals are being updated. And then along Hillsborough Avenue at 1530th and 56th and Hardy. So a lot of these need new hardware to keep those signals in a state of good repair. So those investments are aligned. So looking to next steps, we are presenting to committees. The tip and the party list are on our website for public review. We've mailed the flyers. We're posting the road signs right now, and a newspaper ad will be put in the paper next week. And then this will go to the TPO board for adoption at their June 11th hearing. So the recommended action for you today is to consider recommending that the TPO board approve the fiscal year 26 to 30 transportation improvement program. I can take any questions or comments.
Karen.
I may have asked this before, and I'm sorry, but I don't remember the answer. If you're considered a major project, does that queue you up better to get funded? The reason I'm asking is I wonder, I believe the county and the city, probably all the cities have a list of all the sidewalk gaps, for instance, that are missing. So I wonder, could you ever combine all of that into one project, and it's a major project and it's more apt to get funding?
So when we're speaking directly about the TPO's funding that we can very easily program to, major projects is actually at the bottom of our list, because we realized that if we were gonna advance one of those, it would take decades and nothing else would get funded. So projects like you're talking about, sidewalks, safety treatments, those are already near the top of the list to get funded. So making it a major project for the TPO funding consideration doesn't help it in any way.
Okay, so there's not whoever's deciding about the major project funding, you couldn't sneak those projects in as a major project? Yes, not sneak.
So one thing that we do is, when you think about FDOT's strategic intermodal system, if they've got projects coming up, we always look at our priority list to see what things are nearby that maybe they can incorporate in their scope. But truthfully, I don't think bundling the projects and standalone, this is a sidewalk project, that would not help advance that project any faster.
The slide about the TPO directed funds, where a lot of it was going to Vision Zero. What is because you have the total and then there's this limited amount. what is the amounts or percentage? Is it like 10% of the total, 2%?
Almost 100 million, so I was trying to do the math in my, I think it's like 0.5% of all of the federal and state funds that come to our region, so it's not a big pot, but it's still not nothing, so.
It was good to see it mostly this year, but that's fine.
Yeah, Rebecca?
What are the miscellaneous non-infrastructure projects? Is that staff and administrative?
A lot of things. So that could have been like refurbishing the back rooms at the airport, or it could have been training for DOT staff or upgrading their HVAC system. So we categorize anything that's miscellaneous that isn't directly related to the transportation system.
I move to recommend approval.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
Can I ask a clarifying?
Sure.
In the motion, there's no recognition of Bush Boulevard and the concerns?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing.
Do we want to?
I'll amend my motion.
So does anyone want to put that in a nice sentence or a form? Because they will read it to us, so just.
Are we wanting to see the information?
I think probably best would be, because this is the only chance we'll have to vote on it, I would just add a sentence saying we are concerned about this, because even if we get all the information, we're still concerned about it.
Sidewalk camps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll amend my motion. I move to recommend approval with the strong recommendation that we raise it to the board and
That we have concerns.
that we have concerns about the sidewalk gaps on Bush Boulevard.
In the Bush Boulevard project.
Right.
Yes.
And that project was from Dale Mabry, Nebraska? Okay, yeah. So I would add that, so they know what.
I maintain.
So you resecond? Okay.
Should we add in, I thought, David's point about making sure that it is planned to become available, if that business changes hands, if there is development, is there a way to add a note about that or not?
Right away preservation.
Yeah, and so how do you want to phrase that?
That's a little wax.
Yeah, if that's too complicated to get into in
No,
this question.
it's just.
I think that could be handled. Because I don't know if the TPO would have purview over the right-of-way preservation map, but I think we could internally look at it and just ensure, right, that it's listed on in the.
I think it would be interesting maybe to get a presentation on the right-of-way map, just curiously, and see where it is in these major intersections, like focus on that right-of-way.
Know what the status of that.
Yeah,
is.
Yeah, so why don't we just inquire about that separately, and then we can have them bring it forward to us, so we have an idea of how.
Over there.
Yeah, he's jotting down.
If I could, I would also recommend having the local jurisdictions who enforce that representative, because
Yeah.
like with City of Tampa, it used to be special street setbacks.
Right.
And it was in the comp plan and the code, and then legal department came along and said, we can't really do it, it's a taking. So but other jurisdictions do it in a different way.
The county, yeah.
It's a coordination between AFDOT and the local.
Rebecca, do you know whether the county has still a right-of-way preservation
Well,
map?
they have a corridor preservation,
Okay, which,
but it doesn't necessarily ensure like sidewalks, I think.
no, but
There's a plan.
Yeah. okay.
Okay, so let's finish this motion first. So this is the motion to approve, recommending the tip with a strong concern about the Bush Boulevard segment between Dale Mabry and Nebraska not having complete sidewalks on both sides. We have
That's good.
a first and we have a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Elizabeth, before you start, I am gonna have to leave at 9:50. So I just wanted, just to take a quick point of privilege and say, the city of Tampa just finished, or they said they just started, but they're really almost finished with segments D and E of the Green Artery, which is up by the Lowry Park Zoo and Seminole Heights by the tower, kind of goes through the park, or will go through the park at some point. And I'm hosting a bike ride this Sunday. Will start at 9 a.m. That will take folks on that green segment artery, or the Green Artery segment D and E. And then we'll also ride a new segment, that 18th and 19th, that's going down to I-4. If you have any interest, you can just find me on social media. I will post it there. But I am going to have to leave. And so I just wanted to be able to throw that in there. I also just returned at 1 a.m. from Minneapolis. So looking at this is just, the stuff they're doing is just amazing. So it's good. It's good to see what other people are doing so we can emulate. Yeah, it's, they are now adding bike lanes to sidewalks. They're curbing. And they changed the color of the pavement. It's a dark gray and it's phenomenal. Like, it's all over the city. I biked 35 miles in the city and it was just low stress the whole way. So, but good things that we can do. So, but anyway, okay, let's look at the priority list.
For your consideration today, you have a priority list that will cover the years fiscal year 27 to 31. It's also a subtle change. You'll notice that these years, it's one past the tip. So the TPO priority list that will be approved today will inform the tip. That'll be adopted in June, will inform the tip next year. So what is the list? It's exactly kind of what it sounds like. It is a list of priority projects in rank order 1 through 73 this year, of projects that are a priority to the TPO. And these projects are in various stages. Some are in pre-construction. They still need to finish their PD&E. There are some where they have construction programs. So we expect them to be completed within the nearish future. And there are some that have already been constructed, and I think we need to pause and celebrate some of those priorities that take decades sometimes, like the Green Artery, to see to fruition, because it's not. So how is this list used? Well, first and foremost, this list is used to prioritize those sub-allocated funds that you saw on the previous slide. You got 93 million over 5 years. There's that pot of funding that this list directly goes to. But more than that, it's also another method to communicate a need to DOT on their facilities. Like Karen was saying, there were a bunch of sidewalk projects. How can we get those priorities leveraged into other projects that maybe that they're not the TPO's funding sources? So it's a nice communication method to let DOT know what is important to the community. And then finally, it's just one way to show community support. There are many discretionary grant opportunities out there, and often applicants will point to the TPO's priority list to say, hey, here is demonstrated support for this project. So we're earlier in the process now. So this past winter, we solicited a call for projects and met with all of our local governments in Hart to talk to them about which projects they want to submit for consideration. And then this list will go before the board in June and then be the process that we talked about earlier. Again, this is a really important partnership. So local agencies have an important role in submitting the project applications. And this is an important nuance because the applications have to come from the local governments or from DOT because they are the ones delivering it. So one common question we get, well, I see a need in my neighborhood. How do I get that? Can I submit a project? And unfortunately, no. But we can connect you with local agencies, aligning with the TPO's priorities, and kind of get that project in line to get funded. The TPO is the one that actually determines and adopts that list, sets the long-term vision, and then we use data to evaluate and monitor performance of these investments. DOT also has an important role because they are the ones ultimately programming the funding. All 99% of federal dollars go through DOT. So they have the responsibility of oversight for those projects as well. At a high level, how does this process work and how are projects ranked? We receive the applications from the our partners. We categorize them into buckets to ensure to our LRTP categories to ensure we're comparing apples to apples. It would be kind of unfair to compare a sidewalk project with a road widening. Like, so we put them in these buckets, but we can use project evaluation criteria to really see where that need is and where we can have that maximum benefit. Based on that evaluation, we'll come up with a proposed ranked list and propose that to the board. So let's get into the actual list. Here is a map that shows the variety of projects. Every category is touched all throughout all 3 cities and unincorporated county. There are needs, obviously, that are on this list. And I'm not going to read through you 70+ projects, but here's a map in your packet. I'm happy to email this out as well. So just add the numbers. There are 73 projects on lists, but only about 18% are actively seeking funding. And what I mean by that is we received an application with an estimate from a project sponsor, and now it can compete for funding for fiscal year 31. So that's another important thing with the priority list. If you have a need today, this is not the place to get it because funding is for 5 years out. So that's one of the things that local governments are thinking about as they submit priorities. If there is a project that can wait a little bit longer and cost more, DOT, these funds are a good way to make an existing priority, throw in local funds, throw in federal, and really have it be the investment that the community wants. So here's a list of those projects that are actively competing for funding in fiscal year 31. So one came from City of Temple Terrace to do signal intersection improvements at 56 to Druid Hills. This is near one of their major shopping centers, and there have been a history of bike ped crashes, so they're hopeful that those treatments will improve that situation. HART has also submitted applications to continue the investment and replacing the buses and improving the bus stops, as well as their heavy maintenance facility. City of Tampa submitted an application for traffic calming improvements along Hannah Avenue. City of Temple Terrace also submitted an application for signal and safety improvements also along 56 to 113. Then our final Vision Zero project is in Plant City for Collins Street, Complete Street. That is a longstanding priority for Plant City where they're really envisioning this redevelopment happening and wanting to ensure that the roadway matches that future desired state of a walkable environment. And then Hillsborough County submitted the rest of the projects, a variety of trails. I know that is a priority to the county, whether that's in South County of the South Coast Greenway, Phase 3 finishing, the Upper Tampa Bay Trail in the northwest section of the county, and then the Tampa Bypass Canal. It's also submitted. Then going to our last and final category, those major projects. HART submitted a request for funding for the arterial BRT, and then Hillsborough County submitted 2 widening requests on Gibson Drive and then Fall Road in southern Hillsborough County. There are many projects that are on our priority list of over 50 that are programmed for construction. So that means they have dollars assigned to them over the next 5 years, and we feel good about those starting. So that they stay on the priority list until they're built, because we've seen crazy things happen with cost escalations, and we like to keep them on the list to show DOT that these are a longstanding priority. That if one project needed more resources, that the TPO would support that, given that it's almost across the finish line. Let's finish the projects we start. So I'm just going to call out a few of these for your reference. Again, in the Palm River area near the port, there's going to be a variety of projects, but the most notable one will be a grade separation along US 41 between Austin and south of Causeway. We'll be elevating it over the railroad tracks, as well as adding a bike ped trail and then Collector Street on the side. That signal I mentioned in the tip presentation from 56 at Sawaha, that is funded for construction in fiscal year 29. So we're looking forward to seeing that move forward. And like I said, from the tip presentation, South Tampa Greenlight also has construction funding and later of the 5 years. We expect that to move forward nicely. So to go back and kind of celebrate those projects that have recently been completed, Howard Franklin was the big one that stood out to us. This, I think, was the largest investment in the state of Florida ever for a transportation project. The general use lanes are open to traffic. I believe the express lanes will be open later this summer, and then that multi-use trail is expected to be open, I believe, next summer. The TPO championed Boy Scout Boulevard in Manhattan, a variety of intersection improvements, adding a signal, crosswalks, and some restriping to improve safety and moving traffic. And the longstanding priority that recently completed in December was a variety of pedestrian upgrades along Nebraska Avenue. So you see mid-block crossings, pedestrian island refuges, medians, a lot of important safety features for walkers. And it's also on one of Hertz routes, which helps transit riders as well. And then finally, to close out, new signals have been installed, and this project just wrapped up a few weeks ago to add signals on US 301 in the eastern part of the county near the Nonesassa out to near Plant City. So not only are there new signals here, but there's new crosswalks, and there will also be a connection to the Fort King Trail. So the next steps are very similar to the tip. We're bringing this through committees, doing our engagement. And the recommended action before you today is to recommend that the TPO board approve this priority list. I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Move to approve. Second.
Any comment? No? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you so much, and thank you, your explanations are very, very clear. And I just want to say thank you for that, because this is a very complicated thing. I don't know about you all, but I love how it's now divided. It makes a lot more sense. So I know that was part of the staff and the team's desire, and it really, at least for me, is a lot clearer. So thank you.
I like the interactive map.
Yeah.
I looked it up on my phone. It was easy to see.
Okay, next, I'm gonna pass it off. Thank you all so much.
Next, we have the air quality update. Hello there.
Okay, good. So, good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Sims. I'm with the Environmental Protection Commission of Hillsborough County, also known as EPC. It's interesting to be on this side because we're represented on multiple committees, ITS, the BIPED, and I chair the Technical Advisory Committee. So, again, I didn't bring any tomatoes to fill at this committee, so please don't log any back. But anyway, so we're here to talk a little bit about the importance of air quality in connection to transportation. It's kind of I feel like it's a little bit under realized because I know on my committee involvement, we get kind of hung up in the minutia of intersections and movement and travel and stuff. So every now and then we come back to the committee to remind everybody the importance of, transportation and why the TPO is doing what they're doing to try to move traffic along and reduce idling and so forth like that. So we monitor to ensure compliance with the national health-based standards, and I'm going to talk about that throughout the presentation. We focus on an area where there's a station located nearest the busiest roadway off just west of downtown, where it's specifically targeting transportation emissions. Most of our other monitors, as you shall see, are more regional related to the port, but that one's one that we'll focus a little bit on. And we're going to talk a lot about ozone, because that's our highest one that we deal with locally. And then just remind everybody that we do monitor and track this and issue alerts on those rare occasions that we do get elevated levels. So briefly, what do we do? The agency does a whole sort of relations to the environment. Our areas where I'm involved with is the air division. focusing on areas that might affect air quality, anything from open burning, to asbestos, to, stationary sources, eco, mosaic, all those, what's coming out of the stack. You know, we try to have involvement in all of it. We even get involved with noise on some occasions. That's why you see a picture of the amphitheater, and that wall on the outside was our most heavily litigated case in our history. So we touched on a lot of things, but today our focus is on air monitoring, because that's really where the data is coming from to look at what's important here with the emissions. Probably don't need to spend a lot of time here for, I think everybody understands the connection between health impacts and poor air quality. This one is focused a little on ozone, but it goes really for all the criteria of pollutants. Anybody with asthma, it can affect respiratory most commonly. It really, again, I feel like this is fairly common knowledge. And harsher pollutants can have a more heavy impact. They usually don't travel as far, but again, our focus here is more on ozone and what they can do. And also to remember, they can have at very high concentrations. We don't have that really, but in high concentrations, it can affect crop yields, photosynthesis, suppression of, the plant life. And so it's an important factor to be considered in what we do. And then this is just a brief slide about showing, how our gross domestic product continues to grow. We continue to have a lot of production. There's steady growth in that in population, kind of the increased lines on the left. And then on the bottom left, you'll see, the bottom left is the aggregate pollutants. So it's kind of a success story, because you see all of this, growth. And you see the impacts from the Clean Air Act from the 70s and the amendments that were done in the 90s to show the aggregate reduction in emissions. Over here on the right is them broken down individually. And the center line, the dotted line is where the standard is. And for the most part, everybody, we're pretty well trending under and below. But you will note, like right in the middle, actually right where you were just pointing up,
Yeah.
that we're teetering right on the edge of that in two criteria pollutants. So the green one is ozone, as I mentioned, and the purple is PM 2.5, which is small particle particulate matter, dust, in other words, but the very, very small ones that have more propensity to get deeper into your lungs. So how do we go about getting this data? So this is just a slide to show the whole state. And a series of monitors, air monitors that are operated. Obviously, we're only focused on Hillsborough County, PVC, but this is just giving you a perspective. And the kind of plotting of them in heavy metropolitan areas. I'll talk further about Hillsborough, but you see up in the Jacksonville area, a little down south in the Dade area, and then the Orlando area. Some of this is related to transportation. Some of it's related to the port activity and the sources that are emitting a lot of pollutants. But just give you a perspective on the number of monitors. We operate 10 locally in Hillsborough County. They kind of encompass the bay on the outside edges, but we also have some that extend out into the eastern part of the county to get kind of a comparative. The one we'll talk about, and these run continuously on most pollutants. The one we'll kind of focus on a little bit is the dotted one on the map on the bottom right. That is what we call the Monroe Station I mentioned earlier. It's not far from Julie B. Lane Park and Blake High School on the other side of the interstate. This is the one that's the most heavily traveled roadway. It's really focused on looking at those transportation emissions, nitrogen oxides, black carbon, carbon monoxide. That's what it focuses on. So, well, okay, let me jump over here. This one I won't spend a lot of time on because, spoiler alert, we are in attainment. So don't get anybody get scared. But if we were to go non-attainment, it could have big impacts. It can affect federal money that's being distributed. It could increase costs locally. It could, well, we'd have to deal with conformity, which is a much more labor intensive and heavier staff cost associated with review and submittal of projects. It could make the area less attractive for businesses relocations because they might be required to add on controls to manufacturing operations. There might be other things that added on, even at gasoline pumps where, they have to add on things that increase the cost they charge the consumer. So again, that's all I'm going to spend on it because we are in attainment, as I mentioned. These are the 6 criteria pollutants, and we have been in containment in attainment for some time. The first 4 are the ones most associated with transportation emissions. And then, but like I said, I'm going to focus on two of them, the ones that were close to the line. The first one is PM 2.5. That's the 2.5 micron. That's the one that we tend to put more emphasis, just because PM in general is one that has a limit on it. But this is the one that can get deeper in your lungs and affects you from a respiratory perspective. So that's why we look at these numbers. And they tightened last year, EPA tightened the standard from 12 to 9 for the annual average, which got us a little bit uneasy because our numbers last year were in the 7s, so we're not that far up. But this is a more steady number. This one doesn't move as much. We have less concern about it jumping around because it's kind of from known sources. Really what can affect it that we can't control is fires. A lot of times the fires aren't getting in our county. Those hazy days when in that part of the season that really find that's very small. So that can affect these numbers. Sometimes we can argue out of a bad day and have not count against this because it was out beyond our control, but it's a very, very difficult bar to set. So we don't really fight it unless we're running up against a hard number. But this goes to show, you can see that we have fairly high numbers down in South County. They have, or South State, they have a little bit higher numbers. That so we're not the worst, we're not the best, but also let me go here to do a comparative. So when you look across the country, we're actually very, very below. When you look out west, particularly from various things I can go out there, you can see the numbers are much higher. The bars up into the Midwest. We only are talking about 0 to 1 unhealthy day on a 10-year average. So we're very low. Sometimes I can get lost when you look at the data. We still focus for 0, but again, sometimes it will be beyond our control. And then this is just a look again, showing the graphs how you can see that it's tapered way off as things have been improved. Every so often you'll get a cycle, but you're still only talking about a couple days a year where it would be unhealthy for sensitive groups, and that hasn't happened in several years. As you can see by the trend down on the ground. Okay, so the other pollutant we're going to talk about is ozone. Ozone, everybody hears about and think, there are two types of ozone. The outer layer atmosphere is very important, very beneficial one to what the Earth has and for mankind and so forth. Lower level ozone is unhealthy. That is generated from emissions, but it's actually one of the only ones that is not generated directly. It's caused by a combination of nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds in direct sunlight. So you have to have sunlight to generate these emissions. So it's very meteorological affected and it's more seasonal. We are right now in that season. So it would not be uncommon now we get an advisory. And typically right after cold fronts, when you get very low humidity, stagnant air, and high intensity sun, but you can't do much about it. It is what it is. All we can do is try to, keep things from reducing those precursor pollutants, volatile VOCs and nitrogen oxides. Interestingly, you don't really see the comparative on the graph, but in former years, that graph on the right showed that point sources, industrial sources were the major contributor to this. But now with repowering of a lot of going away from coal, local ET going away from coal, that graph shifted and now transportation emissions are actually the bigger contributor to what leads to ozone. Yes.
Non-road mobile source.
Right, that would be cruise ships, trains, farm equipment, and so forth, yeah. And that's all part of consideration. But, the top right pie is the main thing you think about, trucks on the road and cars on the road.
Yeah.
So I think of anything else I want to say about ozone, but this is the one that we struggle with the most. So this is a list of, and I say struggle, we are not out of compliance, we're just close. So this is a list of the final numbers, and you'll see that for this past year, this is hot off the presses, we just got this a week ago, that our actual representative value for Hillsborough County was 68. The value was 70, which was lower a few years back, and that's a pretty tight standard. A lot of parts of the country are not in compliance with this. So we're at 68. It's a 3-year average. So sometimes you can be paying for this, a bad year 2 years ago. But we're confident we're going to stay there. But like I said, some bad meteorological days can really affect it. So we try to encourage things to just reduce those precursor pollutants. And the other thing you'll note, that 68, we are the highest in the state. And when it comes to ozone, that year in, year out, we think it's more meteorological because of the bay and like Pinellas kind of insulates it. And the pollutants can kind of cook in the sun over the bay and then drift back in one direction. It's kind of a little bit more theoretical, but it kind of seems to make sense when you look at the dynamics of the transportation and the arteries, and you've got the way you've got two major interstates splitting and going right around the bay. It's just, I think that's really why we tend to see higher numbers, especially since some of the other things, like I said, with eco, it's helped reduce it. So this is a similar map before, again, showing a comparative. And again, even though we do struggle on this one to reach the standard, we are far below what you see around the country. And like I said, the meteorological effects, that's why California really struggles, because they have that mountain basin on the other side, and it kind of holds the smog and it holds everything down. They don't get the dispersion and movement of air. And you'll see how high those days are there out west and all of those things. So, feel bad for them, but I feel good for us. So that, that's because we actually are fortunate, even with the conditions we have, that we have enough sort of the air. And then once you get out of that season, we get more into the rainy season, it's not really an issue. Usually it's the April, May time, and then occasionally October, November, that we might have these comparatives. And then again, this is a similar graph showing our monitors locally, and you can see how they trended down. Probably a lot of that impact is from TECO repowering, because in early 2000s is when Gannon and Big Bend went away, so their NOx emissions went way down. But then it's a combination with other efforts that are made. So this was just things that we should consider. What can you do from a transportation? Most of them are logical, but keep doing what TPO does. Encourage meets to move traffic along. Idling traffic causes far more emissions in a local area than moving traffic. You want to get it to A to B and not have it safe stand. Reduce idling practices, to try to encourage people not to have, parking lots where they're just sitting there idling. Promote alternative transportation, obviously, encourage public transit, less cars on the road, one single bus. Alternative technologies, electricity on buses. Another not really positive thing is the hard conversion to natural gas several years ago. That's been another thing that's likely reduced the big impacts, because they're on the roads all the time, as getting out there. And electric vehicle charging infrastructure, which is one of the things we do. Our agency, we have 2 public charging stations on site. We have a couple vehicles in our fleet. I drove one over here today. The electric, from a perspective in the neighborhood, you're going to get, yes, they're being charged, but that's from a power plant where the emissions are far more controlled. You're not emitting it from the tailpipe into the neighborhoods where it could be more prone to affect citizens and in communities. So, that's the public outreach that we do, support the Tampa Bay Clean Cities Coalition, which their goal is the reduction of movement and it's encouraging vehicle movements, particularly related to trucks and diesel. And the diesel is really one of the big contributors because of the fine particulate that get emit. And then this is the final slide about the air quality, just kind of showing you again how we have very few days during the year. We do the best comparative is against the air quality index. That's something that ranks whether we believe the air might be getting to an unhealthy. Usually it starts with an unhealthy for sensitive groups, people with asthma, then elderly, and so forth. And if it gets to that level, we have a couple a year on average. We would issue an advisory and send out a press release and so forth. We had one a couple weeks ago on Nevada's and but again, it's not very common. That's it for the air quality. Real quick, I was just going to give a shout out to this project that TPO is undertook back in, I think it was 2020. It's a community air monitoring network. They got funded through a grant, and were able to secure additional grant funding. So it's a partnership between them and USF and EPC. We kind of provide the technical support, allow them to set a control site and a comparative to our Monroe station that I mentioned earlier. And it's been a great project. They were able to secure additional funding, and it's going on, and it's targeting, as opposed to the regional, like you saw all those, the maps of Florida and all the regional, very, very expensive stations that we operate. This is meant to give you more easily acquired data from local spots, targeting right around the transportation corridors and the people that live around there, often disadvantaged communities that are located right next to the interstate, and also providing engagement means for them to better understand how it can impact you and what you consider what you can do about it. And then this is involved, some of the outreach we do to them. We have the World Car Cemetery Day, I think it was September of last year. We met out in Encore Park in downtown Tampa, engaged with the community and have periodic community meetings on this. But it's a really good project. The data is still being kind of assembled, and it's really, from what we can tell, is not something that's been broadly done across the US. So it'll be interesting to see what happens once we get final results and share them, and it's gonna be handed to TPO decision makers and whatever to see, what impacts that maybe can, or suggestions to help reduce these localized conditions. So that is it for me. With that, I will open up for any questions. I appreciate you allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Any questions? Ken?
Idling drives me absolutely crazy. Do you ever do specific education campaigns or partnerships with maybe schools, the police department, the parks department? Everyone idles all day long, and it drives me crazy.
Yeah, we don't have the specific ones. I know I've commented on projects that come through. I can remember when, like the airport was building their, ground car facility. And, we made the comment that, you have the potential to have many vehicles idling at one time. So a lot of times they pull them up, they let them sit there and idle at maybe 20 minutes before the customer comes out, even gets to the car. So we encourage people to do it. We don't really have a campaign that we offer. I know we'll bring it up at meetings or like at driver education courses, but we're speaking, somebody about a school, and I'll say, that's something. But it is tough though, especially when like I've been at a parade and watched a police officer have his car parked there with the stream of water running down from the air conditioning unit. And he's up here for an hour, moving traffic along like that. I understand you want it cool when you get in. I get that, but doesn't need to sit there for an hour to do it. It's so, yeah, I feel your pain on that. If we just do what we can.
I will comment on that. I actually have recently been working with a member of the Sierra Club who is doing just sort of on his own some air quality monitoring at school car lines. And we tried to do a few just this last week, but at the end of school, things aren't the same. So we're gonna be looking at it again in the fall and trying to find some high car traffic schools and be able to share that data. He's got like a little handheld, I think it's the particulate matter measurement that he's looking at specifically. So that are school car lines that hopefully share that information too. I don't know, advocate for walking to school.
Yeah.
Do you have, can you loan equipment out? Things like that? No.
It's very expensive equipment that are set up on stationary. And that's really been the problem, even with this like community monitoring network thing. Historically, they're not especially reliable, but people market them to say, oh, look, we can get you this data and you can show what it is. But then later the hidden into the pages is that it's only 40% accurate or something like that. So I think now the technology has shown that it's getting tighter. And from what I'm hearing, we have a fair amount of confidence in these monitors that are coming out related to, whatever they're testing there. So, no, we don't have equipment, but I do feel your pain on the car lines because I've been there with my children. And, for one thing, I don't understand why people get there an hour and a half early, in some cases delayed, and they'll inevitably sit there with the car running because it's warm, but oftentimes it's not. And I'm like, well, should open the window and just sit there, not to mention wasting gas. I think I get into a whole nother environmental thing about wasting gas and, and money, and you can just,
I wonder if they have jobs. They just sit there. That's not what they do.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, again, an encouraging movement, of course, would be.
There's some cities that have anti-idling laws where you have fines in place, so I don't know if there's anything for
You have
that.
to find the police.
That's one. Just not one time kind of burning.
It happens all the time. You can
But
see
yeah,
it.
it is what it is. It's worse when there's a congested number, kind of like car line, you have your one random car in a park, it's not gonna affect much, but when you get that concentrated levels. Again, we're fortunate, usually we have a little bit of a wind and movement, so things don't concentrate out. We're not in health concern standards on a regular basis, but anything that could be done to help reduce it. There's a school question.
Does this,
Oh, sorry.
Connor, do you know if, is this report going to be given to the TPO board?
This one is not scheduled, but we could probably work something out. I know, our air monitoring network, we frequently give them updates. And if not,
Just sorry to interrupt, but Nicole's idea, maybe it could be floated up to the TPO board that an anti-idling
oh, okay,
ordinance or whatever could be considered.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen it in different cities where it varies depending on like all buses should have anti-idling laws, like there in Pinellas County, there are anti-idling locations, especially on St. Pete Beach. I know that they require PSTA buses to be off when they're stopped at the, waiting at a transfer point or whatnot, versus like all vehicles anti-idling. So there's variations of the idling laws that are around the country that I know have different levels of fines or different levels of like regulation, but it's one way to address that issue.
Thank you.
Catherine.
I was just wondering about fleets in general and then your monitoring locations. Cause I used to work in the building that was there next to the monitoring location you have on Monroe. That is now torn down, but have you ever thought about putting one at the bus transfer station, the school bus transfer station up in Seminole Heights? And then I think about the buses, school buses, how they just sit and idle in different places, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot of emissions from school buses. And then my mind goes to just general fleets. I know you can't mandate it, but do you have a program or a dog and pony show that you go out to the different companies, larger contractors and stuff that have all these trucks and all this equipment that just sit and idle or are constantly on the streets? Cause you see them all the time just sitting around, sitting in their cars with air conditioning because it's hot outside. So they're sitting on job sites and their air conditioning everywhere. I would think all that compounds to add to it. So I
Yeah.
gave you a lot of questions at once.
Right, yeah, we don't have any particular campaign. I mean, like I said, our focus is gathering the data.
Yeah.
Our transportation is just, that's basically that's
Gotcha.
just part of what I do. But, we try to encourage probably our biggest connection would be with the Tampa Bay Clean Cities Coalition, because they focus on the diesel emissions, which is usually more the fleets, and encouraging conversion to natural gas, which that's really been one of the biggest things in the last 10%, 20 years that's doing. But, also, so they address fleets on occasion and promote the, electric trucks. That technology is improving, although right now it's going to be kind of slow for a while. But, those are, and as far as a meter, we're directed by EPA to put these, they would not be a big thing. Now, I will say though, that Seminole Heights area is where some of these, my understanding is where some of these community monitoring, lower cost monitors are randomly around, so there might be data more available from that as it's gathered. I don't know exactly where they are, but I know it's Seminole Heights and around the bend of, up around I-4 and so forth, so, but the 275 I-4 area, so there could be one of those in the area, or we could talk to TPO about, see if there was somebody that would host one of the meters by the station.
Do you, or does anybody know what the school district has planned for the buses? There's a lot of buses all over the county all day long.
I mean, they
So,
I know there's a lot of politics there.
Yeah, that's
I
it.
know
The
that-
buses are complicated. They're unfunded, so
yeah,
it's a buying new ones and better ones. It's not something you get a lot of money for.
figure that out. Definitely.
I mean, we're the lowest funded state for education in the entire country. That's for teacher pay. That's like buses are only one of the things on that list, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a geographically worldwide county.
Yeah.
So like, I think, I did feel when we talk about potential for some electric buses and something, they're like, well, a lot of our routes are lengthy. We can't meet that. The criteria they need for this, at least that's what we've heard from some of the very, very high level, like potential, could you do this lead? But we'll try to forward just grant opportunities and so forth to see if the schools will undertake it.
Even one bus at a time, just to change out, it'd be slow, but it'd be something.
Well, I don't want to rehash that central times. Even the school buses converted from diesel to natural gas over it. And that's a big deal when you think about the kids sitting there and you're idling, you know, they're gathered in a group and the truck pulls up and it's like an old Charlie Brown cartoon where, you know, the cloud of smoke would come right behind the bus and, you know, the kids would be coughing. You don't see that anymore. You don't see those, you know, from the buses. That kind of taken for granted, you know, emissions are not mostly like from the hard buses, they're up top now, trying to get better dispersion. So there are things that have been improved, but.
Okay.
Yes.
I worry about the EPA. I worry like if they close their doors or if something happens to them, would that affect the work that you guys do?
Potentially, I mean, we're partially funded from federal dollars. So, you know, yeah, it would trickle down to, you would have to realize what how significant impact it would be on some of it, but, you know.
Yeah, I know
What
it's
is
some
it?
grants
After
are
dying,
already
we would
full.
like-
Yeah, they are shuttering a lot.
Yeah,
So-
they're getting rid of programs and I just worry about them.
I mean, we're EPC is state authorized or mandated through an ordinance, so it would have to be the state that would, you know, decide whether we could not exist anyway. I don't think we're anywhere close to that. I think what we would have to do is have an adjustment and a realization budget wise, what can we still provide and what can we no longer provide. That would, again, way much it, that would be. But I have heard about significant cuts in the budget that are being proposed for EPA.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Dr. Connor, with detailed safety insights. That's right. Yeah, I forgot about the pizza. We gotta string this out to.
Yeah, you have 15 minutes. Yeah. Go slowly.
Forgot about that.
Otherwise, we'll be eating a lot of pizza.
Yeah.
It says it for 10:30. They usually come all the way up, but. All right, Connor Travis McDonald, TPO staff, here to present detailed safety insights. Just a little bit of a background, when I presented the performance measures for safety back in January, the TPO board requested some more information on some more crash trend information to help inform how they evaluate the tip. So some of these included the relation to law enforcement, in relation to the intensity of the environment, the geographic analysis to know where these problems are happening. Also days of the week and time of the day, the rates of impaired driving, the rates of crashes that are being. So as it relates to law enforcement, a little more background. We do coordinate with law enforcement through the CTST, the Hillsborough Community Traffic Safety Team. The TPO staff has been meeting with them since 1991. Efforts on education, enforcement campaigns. Some other ongoing efforts are we recently reviewed the standardized crash score, and we have access to crash reports and citation. So as it relates to law enforcement, these are citations in the thousands and fatal serious injury crashes in the thousands from 2020 to 2024. These both kind of remain steady from 2020 to 2023, but we did see a reduction, as you may remember, in fatal and serious injury crashes in 2024. And interestingly, the citations were up in children. This is speeding conditions. So locations with more crashes than citations. This could be done with a little more of a sophisticated analysis, but essentially what I've done is evaluate the hotspots on a mile basis. These are mile hexagons, so they're pretty small areas. That's why these numbers are pretty low. I think there's about 1,300 of these mile areas in the county. But Ruskin near the Shell Point Road and Interchange Street had 3 speed-related fatal or serious crashes in 1 citation from 2020 to 2024. And US 301 and Bonita Drive near Wilmington State Park had 2 fatal but serious injury-related crashes that were speed-related and 1 citation. And overall, there are 411 crashes and 36,000 citations. A little bit more of those locations where they're most similar, so where there are citations and crashes, with Boy Scout Boulevard and West Shore Boulevard, Nebraska Avenue and Fowler Avenue, down Neighborhood Highway between Spruce and Columbus, and again where they're at least similar, and other locations, High Ford. So as it relates to the density of the environment, I first did context classification. This may be familiar to you, but essentially the left side is more rural, it's natural, going through rural. And then on the right end, sort of board where it's more dense and there's also limited access. We related the crashes per mile, so there may be more miles of suburban commercial or more miles of limited access. These are the rates per mile. But the percentage of total crashes, the highest is 42% in suburban commercial. The total fatalities, and this is also 2020 to 2021, is 312. Some examples of these, and this may not be where those crashes are happening per se, but these are just examples that you to help you familiarize yourself with those context and classifications. So an example of suburban commercial would be Fletcher. That doesn't mean that's where those crashes are happening. That's just examples we have. So more on the locales. This is done through signal for network screening. So this could be further analyzed through our high injury network study that I think is planned for later this year. So Old Bend Road is a hot location, I-275, Lamona Road and Lincoln Road. Some other crash trends as requested by the board. The frequency of crashes by day of the week. It's pretty much standard across, but Friday is the highest, 17%. Time of day, it's highest, these are fatal, it's injury crashes again. The highest, it's 4 or 5 p.m., also 6 p.m. And percent of crashes related to impairment has decreased over the years, with the lowest at 1.7% in 2023. The vehicle miles traveled, compare these so you have an idea of the rates, fatal to vehicle miles traveled. We've seen increases since 2020, as you might expect, the lowest of 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic. The highest has been 2024, just over 160 million vehicles. So the rate of crashes that are fatal, we did see increases in 2020 and 2021. We did see a lower rate of 2024. So those two combined, the VMT and the rate of crashes that are fatal, we see that crashes increased as the VMT went down, and as the VMT went up, the crashes went down. So that's what the data says, but I'll allow you to take certain risks. So some TPO efforts to increase safety. Staff and the board continue to program and develop studies and plans. Some examples are a before and after infrastructure implementation analysis, so that you can know what kind of safety tools are working. The high injury network identification, border studies later this year. I think you'll see is in that now that Lisa has worked on. We also have the LRCP, the law, and the TIP, as Elizabeth presented earlier this morning. So with that, I'll take any comments and questions, or if you have any further inquiries, I can certainly take those as well. That was two.
Questions? Caroline?
With the community safety team working with the police department, are you guys kind of working to kind of not necessarily enforce, but ensure that there is more description within those citations and those crashes on why or what happened within this crash, if it was like a turn on red, if it was a near miss, kind of what direction they're coming from, just more details on the type of crash at the location?
Yes, absolutely. So we did have the chance to review the crash form. I don't remember when that was, but it was recently. And then those crash forms do include all that information. It's the whole crash report that the police, that they submit. And we do have access to the form board, including the information that we don't share with Canadian Force, like PII personally did about.
If you go to the FDOT Community Traffic Safety Team, if you just search it and go to the Hillsborough page, you'll see the agenda and meeting minutes. And each of those includes the crash map for the last month that does an overview for the whole year as well. But listed on there are the types of crashes. It's very interesting to see, and you'll see in the minutes that they review exactly what those crashes are each month. I believe there's even a recording of those meetings, although I'm not positive.
Aaron?
Will you do and maybe this already exists, but will you do a kind of a follow-on then? What are the best countermeasures
Yes, so
to crashes?
right, I don't think I'll be leading that, but, I know the county is doing a before and after infrastructure analysis, so maybe, hopefully we can get that to present to the LRC as well. In addition, we have the studies that Lisa and Gina work on, the high true network and the order studies. We will see more safety information.
I had a question regarding, as we saw in Elizabeth's presentations, there's a lot of roads going 4 to 6 lanes ideally, right? They're proposing. In this, I assume we've got data for a long extended period of time. Do we ever look at, do the crashes once a road goes from, 4 lanes to 6 lanes? Are there more fatal accidents on that road? Does it go down? Are people, I would assume they're moving faster through the corridor than you would think, Lisa Silva always, talked about the speed, right? And, people getting hit. Is there any correlation? Is that part of the study? Is that something that could be looked at, or is?
Right,
Your
it's certainly
thoughts?
something that can be looked at. I don't know, off the top of my head. That's a good point in that implementation is that, we can look at more than just safety projects. There's other implementations, whether they're safety focused or not. If it's mitigating congestion, like a widening, we could see what other impacts this has, but we're certainly having.
Right. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thanks, Connor.
Absolutely. Take a little quick, hopefully, but if you all are able to stick around, we'd love to share that with you as an appreciation.
Well, and does anyone have old business or new business? You have anything, Connor? Oh, Emily?
Go ahead. Yeah, well, I was I have 2 things, and I'll let Karen do the second one. I am going to be speaking tonight for the Families for Strong Public Schools on everything that we always talk about, basically livable roadways. What their title is, and I don't have glasses on, so I can barely read it. Rereading the future development, transportation, and environmental justice in our communities. I'll be focusing specifically on where it overlaps with schools. If you are interested in attending that or listening to it later, if you go to the Sidewalks Converse Facebook, you'll find a link to register for that. That is tonight at 6 online. And then
Thursday night, May is National Bike Month. So Thursday night is the National Bike Month celebration. It was downtown's turn to host it. So the 1001 Water Street office building was generous enough to donate their tenant lounge, which is like a rooftop deck. It's a beautiful space and beautiful view. So look for tickets online. It's through Walk Bike Tampa. And he's celebrating be with like all the, bikey advocate kind of people. So giving out some awards and it'll be fun.
Great. Any other Connor?
Yeah, so I wanted to solicit some presentation ideas. If anybody, in addition to there was one information that was requested earlier, but if anybody has additional ideas or something they want to share with the committee, I can write those down and hopefully we can coordinate something later this year. Or you can share them in email if you don't know what's on here.
I would love to have the county come back with their safe routes to school
Okay.
work, update on that, and see where they are in that process. They've been doing that for several years.
Absolutely.
We've got the corridor preservation kind of thing on there. I know for me, I don't know about anyone else, I always like when we have a particular project that is close to getting ready, but they are seeking final input on design. I think for me, I always seems like notice sometimes weird things about the project that helps if we get an explanation of why they're doing that. That helps me, I think. But don't always agree with what they're telling me.
Thank you.
I think even on a finer grain, getting a report from the local staff on their progress on their own walk bike plans and their priorities, because we look at it up here. And then just the projects that are fed through that we get told about with the finer grain on what steps they've taken, which ones they've implemented, which ones they've got on their horizon. It might even call to our attention what maybe they need some funding for that they hadn't thought about. I work in Plant City now, so I just read their plan and they definitely need some help. So, it'd be neat to see where everybody is, because we hear a lot about Tampa, but we don't hear necessarily about the other two.
Update their comp plan.
Yeah, they are updating their comp plan. Be nice to see that finer grain.
Thank you. What else? All right. At 10:30, we can adjourn. No, I'm sticking around for pizza. so-
Okay.
I got one.
Never.